Chinese Navy Liaoning, Shandong ship aircraft carrier formation recently went to the Western Pacific Ocean and other waters to carry out training, by foreign media high attention. This oceanic training is described as China's dual aircraft carriers for the first time at the same time in the Pacific Ocean. Foreign media, rendering their move will challenge the US in the region's maritime hegemony and called on the US Navy to step up its response. Chinese experts interviewed by the Global Times reporter said the US Navy currently available ships, stretched to the limit, want to maintain deterrence against China in the direction of the Western Pacific more and more difficult. Japan's Ministry of Defense, the Unified Shogunate Supervision Department recently released a succession of news, claiming to have found the Chinese aircraft carrier Liaoning and Shandong fleet appeared in the waters of the Western Pacific Ocean. According to the Japanese side of the briefing, the Liaoning ship on June the 7th in the Pacific Ocean offshore of Japan's Minami Torishima navigation, and confirmed that there are shipborne fighters and helicopters landing and taking off, and then the carrier formation on the 9th appeared in the waters near Iwo Jima. The Nihon Keizai Shimbun said this is the first time the Ministry of Defense has announced the Liaoning's activities across the second island chain. The report said the Liaoning escort formation is large, including 055 Type 10,000 tons destroyer Nanchang ship, Wuxi ship, 052D Type destroyer Kikohar ship, Tongshan ship, 054 Type frigate Yantai ship, and 2 integrated supply ship. Unified Shogunate Supervision Department also claimed on the 10th. The SDF found China Shandong ship carrier formation 7 in Miyako Island southeast of about 550 kilometers of the sea navigation. 9 the carrier formation in the connection with the Izu Islands and Gam's second island chain near the Okinotori Reef offshore to carry out the landing of carrier aircraft. The Self-Defense Forces claimed that the carrier formation includes the aircraft carrier Shandong ship, 055 Type 10,000 tons destroyer Zunyi ship, 052D Type destroyer Zhanjiang ship, 054 Type frigate Yunqing ship and Hengshui ship, as well as a comprehensive supply ship. Japanese media speculation, claiming that the Chinese Navy aircraft carrier Liaoning and Shandong ship was found for the first time at the same time in the Pacific Ocean waters. The Japan Self-Defense Force will continue to monitor the Chinese ships, the U.S. Naval Institute website said on the 10th. Japan's Defense Minister Nakatani Yuan said Japan has been communicating with China through diplomatic channels. China is planning to improve the aircraft carrier in the distant sea and airspace combat capability. Against this backdrop, Japan is pushing for the installation of mobile surveillance radars and other equipment on islands off the Pacific coast to strengthen its defense capabilities. We will continue to publicize surveillance information in a timely and appropriate manner, demonstrating Japan's ability to block attempts to unilaterally change the status quo through force or other such actions. In response, Chinese Navy spokesman Navy Captain Wang Zuming said on the 10th that the Liaoning and Shandong carrier formations went to the Western Pacific Ocean and other waters to carry out training and test the force's ability to conduct far-sea defense and joint operations. This is a routine training organized according to the annual plan, aimed at continuously improving the ability to perform the mission, in line with relevant international law and international practice, and is not aimed at specific countries and targets. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Lin Jian also said on the 10th that the activities of Chinese warships in the relevant waters are fully consistent with international law and practice. China has always pursued a defensive national defense policy, and I hope that the Japanese side will look at it objectively and rationally. Although the Chinese Navy and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs have explained the voyage training of the Liaoning and Shandong ships, but the foreign media still wear colored glasses, from the perspective of prevention and conflict to speculate, interpretation. U.S. New York Times said on the 10th, through this distant sea cruise, China's aircraft carrier fleet will prove that they, in times of crisis, can not only deal with Japan, but also with the United States to compete for control of the Western Pacific. Because if the U.S. deploys fleets from Guam, Hawaii or the U.S. West Coast, they will have to pass through these waters to reach the vicinity of Japan or Taiwan. The report also mentions that so far, the 2 Chinese carriers fall short of the 11 super nuclear-powered carriers in service in the U.S. in terms of tonnage and number of aircraft on board. But China has already built its third large carrier, the Fujian, which is currently undergoing sea trials before being commissioned. India's Eurasia Times said on October the 10th that the presence of 2 Chinese carriers in the Pacific Ocean at the same time indicates that the Chinese military is expanding its area of activity with the goal of controlling the vast Pacific Ocean from Japan's remote Ogasawara Islands all the way to the west of the U.S. second island chain in Guam. The Chinese Navy's latest move, according to the U.S. website Diplomat, is an exercise in preventing U.S. forces in the region, including those in Japan and South Korea, from intervening forcefully in the event of an emergency in Taiwan. The Chinese Navy is working to establish a comprehensive readiness system capable of deploying Chinese surface ships, air power and possibly submarines in the Western Pacific and elsewhere. For its part, Newsweek 11 noted that the PLA's official account also released photos of the two Chinese carriers' far-flung training exercises, including the takeoff of J-15 fighters from the carriers during the daytime and nighttime. It's not clear whether the Liaoning and the Shandong ships are operating in the same waters, and according to maps obtained by Newsweek, the two carriers were last traced according to maps obtained by Newsweek. The two carriers were last tracked on the eastern and western sides of the second island chain, respectively. According to the U.S. power websites, Warzone Channel on the 10th, the Liaoning's and Shandong's offshore training highlights the Chinese Navy's growing carrier strength. It is noteworthy that the Chinese Navy has publicly acknowledged the dual-carrier joint exercises in these highly strategic waters. The report acknowledges that the Chinese Navy has every right to operate in the waters around the first and second island chains and beyond, and that the strategic significance of Chinese carriers operating in the region, especially in two carrier formations, is very significant. These island chains were created by the U.S. as a foreign policy tool, and their primary role is to serve as a strategic line of defense to hold China's naval power in check. By projecting its growing naval power into these regions, China has demonstrated how it can respond to the operational capabilities of the U.S. military and its allies into these key regions and the broader Pacific in a conflict scenario. The U.S. media also mentioned that the Liaoning and Shandong carrier formations have already conducted their first joint exercise in October 2024 in the South China Sea. The dual carrier formations operations in key waters are also a powerful symbol of China's military strength. With China's third carrier, the Fujian, undergoing pre-commissioning trials, it is only a matter of time before the three Chinese naval carriers will be able to carry out joint combat missions in the Western Pacific and beyond. The U.S. media also boldly predicted that soon a Chinese naval carrier formation could sail near Guam and head further east to Wake Island, Midway Island, and eventually Hawaii. Meanwhile, the Chinese Navy is increasingly emphasizing its deployment around Alaska and in the Arctic. What makes the U.S. media anxious is that in China's dual aircraft carriers out of the second island chain to start distant sea training, the U.S. deployed in the region of the two aircraft carriers are not able to synchronize surveillance. The U.S. Naval Institute website released on the 10th dynamic shows that the current U.S. Nimitz carrier strike group is active in the South China Sea, which is the U.S. Navy's oldest active aircraft carrier, will be retired after the completion of this deployment. The other carrier in the region, the USS Washington, has been in port most of the time since it arrived in Japan late last year. The U.S. newspaper Stars and Stripes said on the 10th, just as China's aircraft carriers headed to the second island chain, the Washington carrier at noon on the 10th sailed out of Tokyo Bay, began since last year's arrival in Japan for the first time since the patrol. The carrier arrived at the U.S. military base in Yokosuka, Japan, on November the 22nd last year, and has been under repair since then, until May the 25th to June the 4th this year, when it launched a short sea trial. According to the report, photos from the scene showed no carrier aircraft on the flight deck when the carrier left port, the report said, adding that the carrier's fifth carrier wing had just completed training at Iwo Jima. According to Stars and Stripes, the Washington's departure coincides with increased Chinese naval activity in the region, which is seen as part of China's expansion of its blue water naval capabilities. Military expert Zhang Junxia previously said that China's dual aircraft carriers at the same time in the Western Pacific Ocean drills, but also to the outside world to send a signal. China's naval joint maritime operations, far-sea defense and combat capabilities in the enhancement of the ability to protect the home and the country in the enhancement of the ability to fight the enemy in the future at a greater distance, and gradually enhance the ability to defend the enemy outside the country's gates. Another Chinese expert interviewed by the Global Times reporter said that a number of U.S. media outlets have mentioned that the U.S. Navy needs to deal with the Chinese aircraft carriers' aggressive oceanic training, but the reality is that the U.S. Navy's current available strength has been stretched to the limit. The U.S. Naval Institute's website reveals that of the 11 active carriers in the U.S. Navy, in addition to the USS Washington and USS Nimitz in the Western Pacific, only the USS Carl Vinson in the Middle East and the USS Vinson on the U.S. East Coast are in service. In addition to the USS Washington and USS Nimitz in the Western Pacific, only the USS Carl Vinson in the Middle East, and the USS Bush on the east coast of the United States are in an active state, and there are no other U.S. aircraft carriers available in the vast Pacific Ocean, where the two Chinese carriers are active.